We do need to worry, and my column really is urging the authorities to take political violence more seriously and provide more of a deterrent for people who might actually be trying to organise the harassment of MPs and politicians, and also point to some ways in which we may be able to defuse the sort of social and emotional and psychological stresses that give rise to it.
Let's start with the issue to do with the attempted assassination of President Trump. President Biden has warned that politics mustn't become a killing field. He made a TV address from the Oval Office in the wake of the attempted assassination. Let's hear what he had to say.
A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We must not go down this road in America.
So this is obviously the issue that is dominating the news and will continue to do so. Edward Lucas, I can't imagine, you have written a column in today's Times about some of the hostility you faced as you knocked on doors during your election campaign. Tell us your thoughts.
Well, I actually think politics in this country is still, on the whole, much safer and much friendlier and much less polarized than in the United States. But that's no reason for complacency. And we all face security worries when we go out on the doorstep. There are some pretty crazy people out there, and I kick off my column by describing an encounter with a voter who did actually say, "I would like to kill you." And I said, "I'll try not to take that person in." She said, "No, I mean it." Now, I wasn't actually that frightened because she was a rather small lady in her 80s. And when we got chatting, I found that she'd actually had a pretty miserable life. And this sort of rage against politicians was really an expression of her alienation from the political system and society in general. But we do need to worry. And my column really is urging the authorities to take political violence more seriously and provide more of a deterrent for people who might actually be trying to organise the harassment of MPs and politicians, and also point to some ways in which we may be able to defuse the sort of social and emotional and psychological stresses that give rise to it.
I mean, one shouldn't make light of this in the light of the murder of Joe Cox and the murder of David Amess, and indeed the attempted murder of some MPs like Michael Gove, who had to have police protection for 3 or 4 years because the man who attacked David Amess had planned to attack him. I mean, I once had armed protection only because somebody wrote a letter saying they'd want to punch me on the nose, and the police decided to give me armed protection for a day while they arrested him. But generally speaking, I agree with you, Edward. British politics is very civilized. I enjoy the fact that whenever you go knocking on the door, you can interpret what the voters are saying, but they're always very polite. Whenever they say, "I'm still thinking about it," it means they'd never vote for you in a million years. But Dr. von Hippel, you obviously have a global view as well as a domestic view on the rise of political violence, particularly in democracies, I think we're talking about more and more.
Right. I mean, it's a global issue. I think in the United Kingdom, it's more civilized. You have more opportunities to debate in public, whether that's in Parliament or elsewhere. That doesn't happen as much at the scale in the United States. But certainly it's a global issue. We saw an attempt on Bolsonaro in 2016. We saw an attempt on the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Fico, recently. So it is a global phenomenon, but the problem in the United States is exacerbated because, of course, there are more weapons than people. There are more small arms than people in the United States. And so if you have an open society and you have open arenas where people can come and hear their candidates speak, you're going to be at risk. This particular instance was shocking because it appeared that the Secret Service let down their guard for some reason, and we don't understand that yet. But, even if that, there's always an opportunity in an open society to try to cause harm.
Absolutely. I mean, let's talk now about another completely different subject, but actually quite relevant given the potential that President Trump looks likely that he's going to win the election in November. It's going to significantly affect Europe's relationships with the United States, in my view. And there's a meeting today in Brussels. We have a new EU relations minister, Nick Thomas Simmons. He is going to meet the European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic to talk about common defence and the defence and security relationship. And of course, coming up, Blenheim Palace is going to play host to 50 European leaders as part of the European political community that Macron set up to bring the EU and other European states together. So there's going to be a blizzard of UK EU contacts, which is going to get everyone very revved up in both directions. Dr. Hibble, what do you see happening on the back of this kind of engagement?
Well, look, I wouldn't assume that Trump is going to win, and I wouldn't assume that Biden is going to stay in this race. We've already seen this campaign has thrown us so many surprises along the way, and the Democratic convention is still a month away. We're still waiting for polls to come out post this assassination attempt. If it looks like Trump is hugely ahead of Biden, that he may actually reconsider. So I wouldn't assume that it's going to be Trump versus Biden and that Trump will win at this point. It's still early days, as you know, from any political campaign. In terms of these other events, yes, they will be overshadowed for sure by the events in the United States and what that might mean. And they will be planning, as you are saying, for a Trump win and what that will mean for NATO, for European security, for NATO writ large. And so it actually, irrespective of who wins in the United States, it's good for Europeans and for NATO to think about fortifying the alliance in light of a changed American political circumstance.
And Edward, you obviously at the heart of European policy making and at the heart of British domestic politics. What do you see as the opportunities for Keir Starmer to build a new relationship with the EU?
I think that this is very promising. I suspect many of your listeners may need a little reminder about the European political community. This is the Macron project to try and bring in the big non-EU countries, chiefly Britain, but also Norway and perhaps even Turkey, into European decision-making. And the Europeans are really ready for a reset. They are scared, not just by the prospect of a Trump presidency, but they're also pretty scared by what they're seeing with the Biden presidency, the dithering and delay, which has cost Ukraine a huge amount of destruction and lives and misery. So we are tumbling into a post-Atlantic security order where the Europeans, who are plenty big and rich enough to do this, are going to have to do at least most and possibly all of their own defence. And if they're going to do that, Britain is super important. We are, along with France, one of the two sort of pillars of the European military establishment, even in our current enfeebled state. So there's a lot to talk about. The question is how it works out. And my other column this week, not for the Times, but for my think tank, is about this Blenheim meeting and what we should expect. I think the things will get going probably more in the first half of next year, when we have the Polish government in charge of the European Union's rotating presidency, and Poland, being a strong British ally and keen to get going on defence, I think will give the ball a really hefty kick. So the Blenheim talks will be more, I suspect, preliminary than substantive.